Police in South Korea and anti-corruption officials expect to carry out their second attempt to detain impeached President Yoon Suk Yeol as early as tomorrow morning. Well, that's according to Yonhap news agency, which also reports, citing officials, that a military unit guarding the presidential residence has given its approval for entry into this compound. Oh, that's where the suspended leader has been staying. The first attempt to execute an arrest warrant for Mr Yoon was prevented by the Presidential Security Service. Early today, the Constitutional Court began its impeachment trial against the embattled leader. But the session, is the first of 5 such hearings, ended in minutes after Mr Yoon failed to show up. The court is expected to hear more substantive arguments in the next session. Now, this is due on Thursday. CNA's senior career correspondent Lim Yoon-suk has more from today's hearing.
He wasn't there at the impeachment trial earlier, and there had been some speculation that he would attend personally, since his lawyers had earlier said that he would, to defend himself, attend some of the impeachment trials. But following that first failed attempt by investigators to arrest him, I think President Yoon and his lawyers thought that it was too risky, since his lawyers are concerned that he could be detained if he attends his trials. Like, he could just walk out of the Constitutional Court after their hearing, and there will be investigators waiting for him outside to take him away. And that's why his lawyer said that he couldn't attend Tuesday's hearing. This was the first hearing at the Constitutional Court. It only lasted about 4 minutes, with the court confirming the attendances by the two sides, one representing President Yoon and the other representing Parliament, which voted to impeach President Yoon. Then it was really over, with the court saying that the next session will be held as scheduled on Thursday this week. Now, it's unsure if President Yoon Suk Yeol will be attending Thursday's session, but if things have not changed and they are in the situation we are now, with investigators still trying to figure out a way to arrest him, then it is very likely that President Yoon will not be at that hearing too.
오늘 재판 진행 상황과 추후 상황을 보면서 우리 증거 신청 그리고 입증 방법들을 종합적으로 검토해서 결정을 하도록 하겠습니다.
공수처의 3차례에 걸친 체포 소환 요구에 응하지 않았고 2차례에 걸친 체포집 영장을 발부케 하는 국법을 극단적으로 멸시하고 모멸하고 무시하는 행태를 반복하고 있습니다. 존경하는 대한민국의 헌법재판소의 재판관 여러분들께서 신속하고 엄정하게 윤석열에 대한 파면 결정을 내려주실 것을 진심으로 간곡히 부탁드립니다. 이상입니다.
And for more on South Korea's political crisis, now this has been in place since early December last year. CNA's Grace Shin joins me live in the studio. Grace, now that hours-long imposition of martial law, that has led to the turmoil we're seeing in political circles in South Korea. In this time, we've seen public opinion ebb and flow as far as Mr. Yoon is concerned.
Right, Wei-Su, I would like to highlight how there has been a stark contrast in terms of public approval ratings when it comes to President Yoon Suk Yeol. Up till today, 6 of the latest public polls recorded Yoon's approval ratings well over 40%, and that's a big bounce back from when it hit a record low of 12%. And there's a reason why. Analysts believe there's 3 reasons. Number 1, it's the fact that some people have actually been persuaded by what President Yoon said back on December 12th, which was a little after a week since he did impose the martial law, though it only lasted for a few hours. He had explained that he had no choice and he was pushed to the brinks of a national security threat because of anti-state forces. Now, another argument that is gaining a lot of traction at the moment is the amount of people in their 20s and 30s that are suddenly showing support for the suspended President Yoon. Now, this generation is also dubbed the thumb generation, meaning that they're very adept at using the internet. They're exposed to so many news outlets out there, and it's up to them to filter out what's fake news and what's propaganda or what could be misleading. And because of the fact that observers believe that the thumb generation aren't completely swayed by Yoon's explanation behind the martial law, but they aren't as easily as swayed as what the Democratic Party is saying, which is he is behind a treason. He's the culprit of treason. He should be charged with insurrection, but the younger generation believes the Constitutional Court did not make their final say yet, so it might be misleading to come down to that conclusion. Now, a third reason to why approval ratings might have bounced back up is because approval ratings for the opposition bloc, the Democratic Party, have come down. Many believe that the DP is actually using the failed martial law decree in their own political favor, especially DP leader Lee Jae-myung, who might be using potential early elections for his own political motive of evading criminal charges.
All right, these approval ratings likely or possibly affected by a failed first attempt to arrest Mr. Yoon. And another attempt might take place as early, as I mentioned earlier, as tomorrow morning.
As early as tomorrow morning, and the Corruption Investigation Office for High-Ranking Officials, or the CIO, has actually secured an extension of their first and now the second arrest warrant. And President Yoon has since defied such attempts. His legal team made clear they would only comply if he were formally indicted or from a proper court, namely the Seoul Central District Court instead of a regional court, and which has primary jurisdiction over CIO-related cases. Now, according to sources familiar with the matter, as you mentioned earlier, police held their third meeting of field commanders today to discuss plans to detain impeached President Yoon. Now, they reportedly mentioned deploying 1,000 security personnel after their failed attempt last time. They were barred off from the presidential security forces at the time. They also sent a notice requesting compliance and warning that they would arrest anyone trying to block them again. So a military unit guarding the presidential residence on Tuesday apparently approved their entry. But earlier in the day, this is where it gets a little confusing, is the Presidential Security Service also suggested that they would block the attempt, saying that any forced entry is illegal. So eyes are on and concerns are mounting as to whether a physical clash is inevitable during the second attempt to trying to detain President Yoon.
All right, several parallel proceedings taking place here. So this arrest is not just impeachment, it's also on possible charges of insurrection as well. Authorities, in the meantime, not just looking at Mr. Yoon, but also looking at who else should be held accountable for that short-lived declaration of martial law.
Exactly. That's why a parliamentary special committee was held earlier today to conduct its first inquiry of Yoon's insurrection allegations. We saw key witnesses, including Army Chief of Staff General Park An-soo, who served as the martial law commander there. And during the session, both the ruling and opposition parties criticized each other as to whether this was politically motivated or as to why the president decided to mobilize military forces. Now, the same special committee has decided to summon Mr. Yoon as well next week for another inquiry. So as you mentioned, Mr. Yoon is facing many different charges against him, many different investigations and hearings, but we'll have to see whether any of them take place.
Well, thanks for that. Grace Shin explaining everything that's happening. There's a great deal happening in South Korea right now.
Thank you.